Hello friends, I'm Ellie, welcome to Cardboard Design. Today, let's listen to beautiful and meaningful fairy tales. I believe you will like it. First fairy tale, Bearskin. There was once a young fellow who enlisted as a soldier, conducted himself bravely, and was always the foremost when it rained bullets. So long as the war lasted, all went well, but when peace was made, he received his dismissal, and the captain said he might go where he liked. His parents were dead, and he had no longer a home, so he went to his brothers and begged them to take him in and keep him until war broke out again. The brothers, however, were hard-hearted and said,
"What can we do with it? Thou art of no use to us. Go and make a living for thyself."
The soldier had nothing left but his gun. He took that on his shoulder and went forth into the world. He came to a wide heath on which nothing was to be seen but a circle of trees. Under these he sat sorrowfully down and began to think over his fate.
"I have no money.
Thought he.
I have learned no trade but that of fighting, and now that they have made peace they don't want me any longer, so I see beforehand that I shall have to starve."
All at once he heard a rustling, and when he looked round, a strange man stood before him, who wore a green coat and looked right stately, but had a hideous cloven foot.
"I know already what thou art in need of.
Said the man.
Gold and possessions shall thou have, as much as thou canst make away with do what thou wilt. But first I must know if thou art fearless, that I may not bestow my money in vain."
A soldier and fear? How can those two things go together?
He answered.
Thou canst put me to the proof.
"Very well, then.
Answered the man.
Look behind there."
The soldier turned round and saw a large bear, which came crawling towards him.
"Oh,
Cried the soldier.
I will tickle thy nose for thee, so that thou shalt soon lose thy fancy for growing."
And he aimed at the bear and shot it through the muzzle. It fell down and never stirred again.
"I see quite well
Said the stranger.
that thou art not wanting in courage, but there is still another condition which thou wilt have to fulfill."
"If it does not endanger my salvation."
Replied the soldier, who knew very well who was standing by him.
"If it does, I'll have nothing to do with it. Thou wilt look to that for thyself.
Answered Greencoat.
Thou shalt for the next 7 years neither wash thyself, nor comb thy beard, nor thy hair, nor cut thy nails, nor say one paternoster. I will give thee a coat and a cloak, which during this time thou must wear. If thou deest during these 7 years, thou art mine. If thou remainest alive, thou art free and rich to boot for all the rest of thy life."
The soldier thought of the great extremity in which he now found himself, and as he so often had gone to meet death, he resolved to risk it now also, and agreed to the terms. The devil took off his green coat, gave it to the soldier, and said,
"If thou hast this coat on thy back and puttest thy hand into the pocket, thou wilt always find it full of money.
Then he pulled the skin off the bear and said,
This shall be thy cloak, and thy bed also, for thereon shalt thou sleep, and in no other bed shalt thou lie, and because of this apparel shalt thou be called Bearskin."
After this the devil vanished. The soldier put the coat on, felt at once in the pocket, and found that the thing was really true. Then he put on the bearskin and went forth into the world, and enjoyed himself, refraining from nothing that did him good and his money harm. During the first year his appearance was passable, but during the second he began to look like a monster. His hair covered nearly the whole of his face. His beard was like a piece of coarse felt. His fingers had claws, and his face was so covered with dirt that if cress had been sown on it, it would have come up. Whosoever saw him ran away, but as he everywhere gave the poor money to pray that he might not die during the 7 years, and as he paid well for everything he still always found shelter. In the 4th year, he entered an inn where the landlord would not receive him, and would not even let him have a place in the stable, because he was afraid the horses would be scared. But as Bearskin thrust his hand into his pocket and pulled out a handful of ducats, the host let himself be persuaded and gave him a room in an outhouse. Bearskin was, however, obliged to promise not to let himself be seen, lest the inn should get a bad name. As Bearskin was sitting alone in the evening, and wishing from the bottom of his heart that the 7 years were over, he heard a loud lamenting in a neighboring room. He had a compassionate heart, so he opened the door and saw an old man weeping bitterly and wringing his hands. Bearskin went nearer, but the man sprang to his feet and tried to escape from him. At last, when the man perceived that Bearskin's voice was human, he let himself be prevailed on, and by kind words Bearskin succeeded so far that the old man revealed the cause of his grief. His property had dwindled away by degrees. He and his daughters would have to starve, and he was so poor that he could not pay the innkeeper and was to be put in prison.
If that is your only trouble,
Said Bearskin.
I have plenty of money.
He caused the innkeeper to be brought thither, paid him, and put a purse full of gold into the poor old man's pocket beside. When the old man saw himself set free from all his troubles, he did not know how to be grateful enough.
Come with me.
Said he to Bearskin.
My daughters are all miracles of beauty. Choose one of them for thyself as a wife. When she hears what thou hast done for me, she will not refuse thee. Thou dost in truth look a little strange, but she will soon put thee to rights again.
This pleased Bearskin well, and he went. When the eldest saw him, she was so terribly alarmed at his face that she screamed and ran away. The second stood still and looked at him from head to foot, but then she said,
How can I accept a husband who no longer has a human form? This shaven bear that once was here and passed itself off for a man pleased me far better, or at any rate it wore a hussar's dress and white gloves. If it were nothing but ugliness, I might get used to that.
The youngest, however, said,
Dear father, that must be a good man to have helped you out of your trouble, so if you have promised him a bride for doing it, your promise must be kept.
It was a pity that Bearskin's face was covered with dirt and with hair, or if not, they might have seen how delighted he was when he heard these words. He took a ring from his finger, broke it in two, and gave her one half, the other he kept for himself. He wrote his name, however, on her half and hers on his, and begged her to keep her peace carefully, and then he took his leave and said,
I must still wander about for 3 years, and if I do not return then, thou art free, for I shall be dead. But pray to God to preserve my life.
The poor betrothed bride dressed herself entirely in black, and when she thought of her future bridegroom, tears came into her eyes. Nothing but contempt and mockery fell to her lot from her sisters.
Take care,
Said the eldest.
if thou givest him thy hand, he will strike his claws into it. Beware,
Said the second.
bears like sweet things, and if he takes a fancy to thee, he will eat thee up. Thou must always do as he likes,
Began the elder again.
or else he will growl.
And the second continued.
But the wedding will be a merry one, for bears dance well.
The bride was silent and did not let them vex her. Bearskin, however, traveled about the world from one place to another, did good where he was able, and gave generously to the poor that they might pray for him. At length, as the last day of the 7 years dawned, he went once more out onto the heath and seated himself beneath the circle of trees. It was not long before the wind whistled, and the devil stood before him and looked angrily at him. Then he threw Bearskin his old coat and asked for his own green one back.
We have not got so far as that yet.
Answered Bearskin.
Thou must first make me clean.
Whether the devil liked it or not, he was forced to fetch water and wash Bearskin, comb his hair, and cut his nails. After this, he looked like a brave soldier and was much handsomer than he had ever been before. When the devil had gone away, Bearskin was quite light-hearted. He went into the town, put on a magnificent velvet coat, seated himself in a carriage drawn by 4 white horses, and drove to his bride's house. No one recognized him. The father took him for a distinguished general and led him into the room where his daughters were sitting. He was forced to place himself between the 2 eldest. They helped him to wine, gave him the best pieces of meat, and thought that in all the world they had never seen a handsomer man. The bride, however, sat opposite to him in her black dress, and never raised her eyes nor spoke a word. When at length he asked the father if he would give him one of his daughters to wife, The two eldest jumped up, ran into their bedrooms to put on splendid dresses, for each of them fancied she was the chosen one. The stranger, as soon as he was alone with his bride, brought out his half of the ring and threw it in a glass of wine which he reached across the table to her. She took the wine, but when she had drunk it and found the half ring lying at the bottom, her heart began to beat. She got the other half, which she wore on a ribbon round her neck, joined them, and saw that the two pieces fitted exactly together. Then said he,
I am thy betrothed bridegroom, whom thou sawest as Burskin, but through God's grace I have again received my human form, and have once more become clean.
He went up to her, embraced her, and gave her a kiss. In the meantime, the two sisters came back in full dress, and when they saw that the handsome man had fallen to the share of the youngest, and heard that he was Burskin, they ran out full of anger and rage. Lessons from this story: Burskin. 1. The importance of compassion and filial piety. The young soldier, even without a family of his own, extended help to others in times of need. And the elderly man's family received assistance from Burskin during their difficult times. 2. Evaluating people based on actions rather than appearances. Despite Burskin's peculiar and intimidating appearance, his actions demonstrated kindness and generosity. I'd recognize the true value of Burskin through his actions, looking beyond his outward appearance. 3. Decision-making and responsibility. Burskin accepted the challenge presented by the demon, not only to help others, but also to fulfill his debts and responsibilities. I chose to accept Burskin, despite his unconventional appearance, showcasing determination and a sense of responsibility in keeping promises and repaying kindness. Second fairy tale, Wise Folks. One day, a peasant took his good hazel stick out of the corner and said to his wife,
Trina, I am going across country and shall not return for 3 days. If during that time the cattle dealer should happen to call and want to buy our 3 cows, you may strike a bargain at once, but not unless you can get 200 thalers for them. Nothing less. Do you hear?
For heaven's sake, just go in peace,
answered the woman.
I will manage that,
You indeed.
said the man.
You once fell on your head when you were a little child, and that affects you even now. But let me tell you this, if you do anything foolish, I will make your back black and blue, and not with paint, I assure you, but with the stick which I have in my hand. And the coloring shall last a whole year. You may rely on that.
And having said that, the man went on his way. Next morning, the cattle dealer came, and the woman had no need to say many words to him. When he had seen the cows and heard the price, he said,
I am quite willing to give that. Honestly speaking, they're worth it. I will take the beasts away with me at once.
He unfastened their chains and drove them out of the byre, but just as he was going out of the yard door, the woman clutched him by the sleeve and said,
You must give me the 200 thalers now, or I cannot let the cows go.
True,
answered the man.
but I have forgotten to buckle on my money belt. Have no fear. However, you shall have security for my pain. I will take 2 cows with me and leave 1, and then you will have a good pledge.
The woman saw the force of this, and let the man go away with the cows, and thought to herself,
How pleased Hans will be when he finds how cleverly I have managed it.
The peasant came home on the 3rd day, as he had said he would, and at once inquired if the cows were sold.
Yes, indeed, dear Hans.
Answered the woman.
And as you said, for 200 thalers. They are scarcely worth so much, but the man took them without making any objection.
Where is the money?
Asked the peasant.
Oh, I have not got the money,
replied the woman.
He had happened to forget his money belt, but he will soon bring it, and he left good security behind him.
What kind of security?
Asked the man.
One of the 3 cows, which he shall not have until he has paid for the other 2. I have managed very cunningly, for I have kept the smallest, which eats the least.
The man was enraged and lifted up his stick, and was just going to give her the beating he had promised her. Suddenly, he let the stick fail and said,
You are the stupidest goose that ever waddled on God's earth, but I am sorry for you. I will go out into the highways and wait for 3 days to see if I find anyone who is still stupider than you. If I succeed in doing so, you shall go scot-free, but if I do not find him, you shall receive your well-deserved reward without any discount.
He went out into the great highways, sat down on a stone, and waited for what would happen. Then he saw a peasant's wagon coming towards him, and a woman was standing upright in the middle of it, instead of sitting on the bundle of straw which was lying beside her, or walking near the oxen and leading them. The man thought to himself,
That is certainly one of the kind I am in search of.
and jumped up and ran backwards and forwards in front of the wagon like one who is not very wise.
What do you want, my friend?
Said the woman to him.
I don't know you. Where do you come from?
I have fallen down from heaven,
Replied the man.
and don't know how to get back again. Couldn't you drive me up?
No,
Said the woman.
I don't know the way, but if you come from heaven, you can surely tell me how my husband, who has been there these 3 years, is. You must have seen him.
Oh, yes, I have seen him, but all men can't get on well. He keeps sheep, and the sheep give him a great deal to do. They run up the mountains and lose their way in the wilderness, and he has to run after them and drive them together again. His clothes are all torn to pieces too, and will soon fall off his body. There is no tailor there, for St. Peter won't let any of them in, as you know by the story.
Who would have thought it?
Cried the woman.
I tell you what, I will fetch his Sunday coat which is still hanging at home in the cupboard. He can wear that and look respectable. You will be so kind as to take it with you.
That won't do very well.
Answered the peasant.
People are not allowed to take clothes into heaven. They are taken away from one at the gate.
Then hark you.
Said the woman.
I sold my fine wheat yesterday and got a good lot of money for it. I will send that to him. If you hide the purse in your pocket, no one will know that you have it.
If you can't manage it any other way,
Said the peasant.
I will do you that favor.
Just sit still where you are,
Said she.
and I will drive home and fetch the purse. I shall soon be back again. I do not sit down on the bundle of straw but stand up in the wagon because it makes it lighter for the cattle.
She drove her oxen away, and the peasant thought,
That woman has a perfect talent for folly. If she really brings the money, my wife may think herself fortunate, for she will get no beating.
It was not long before she came in a great hurry with the money, and with her own hands put it in his pocket. Before she went away, she thanked him again 1,000 times for his courtesy. When the woman got home again, she found her son who had come in from the field. She told him what unlooked for things had befallen her, and then added,
I am truly delighted at having found an opportunity of sending something to my poor husband. Who would ever have imagined that he could be suffering for want of anything up in heaven?
The son was full of astonishment.
Mother,
Said he,
it is not every day that a man comes from heaven in this way. I will go out immediately and see if he is still to be found. He must tell me what it is like up there and how the work is done.
He saddled the horse and rode off with all speed. He found the peasant who was sitting under a willow tree and was just going to count the money in the purse.
Have you seen the man who has fallen down from heaven?
Cried the youth to him.
Yes,
Answered the peasant.
he has set out on his way back there, and has gone up that hill, from whence it will be rather nearer. You could still catch him up, if you were to ride fast.
Alas,
Said the youth.
I have been doing tiring work all day, and the ride here has completely worn me out. You know the man. Be so kind as to get on my horse, and go and persuade him to come here.
Aha!
Thought the peasant.
Here is another who has no wick in his lamp. Why should I not do you this favor?
Said he, and mounted the horse and rode off in a quick trot. The youth remained sitting there till night fell, but the peasant never came back.
The man from heaven must certainly have been in a great hurry and would not turn back.
Thought he.
And the peasant has no doubt given him the horse to take to my father.
He went home and told his mother what had happened, and that he had sent his father the horse so that he might not have to be always running about.
Thou hast done well.
Answered she.
Thy legs are younger than his, and thou canst go on foot.
When the peasant got home, he put the horse in the stable beside the cow which he had as a pledge, and then went to his wife and said,
Trina, as your luck would have it, I have found you who are still sillier fools than you. This time you escape without a beating. I will store it up for another occasion.
Then he lighted his pipe, sat down in his grandfather's chair, and said,
It was a good stroke of business to get a sleek horse and a great purse full of money into the bargain for 2 lean cows. If stupidity always brought in as much as that, I would be quite willing to hold it in honor.
So thought the peasant, but you no doubt prefer the simple folks. Third fairy tale. The peasant's wise daughter. There was once a poor peasant who had no land, but only a small house, and one daughter. Then said the daughter,
We are to ask our lord the king for a bit of newly cleared land.
When the king heard of their poverty, he presented them with a piece of land, which she and her father dug up, and intended to sow with a little corn and grain of that kind. When they had dug nearly the whole of the field, they found in the earth a mortar made of pure gold.
Listen,
Said the father to the girl,
as our lord the king has been so gracious and presented us with a field, we have to give him this mortar in return for it.
The daughter, however, would not consent to this, and said,
Father, if we have the mortar without having the pestle as well, we shall have to get the pestle, so you had much better say nothing about it.
He would, however, not obey her, but took the mortar and carried it to the king, said that he had found it in the cleared land, and asked if he would accept it as a present. The king took the mortar, and asked if he had found nothing besides that.
No.
Answered the countryman. Then the king said that he must now bring him the pestle. The peasant said they had not found that, but he might just as well have spoken to the wind. He was put in prison, and was to stay there until he produced the pestle. The servants had daily to carry him bread and water, which is what people get in prison, and they heard how the man cried out continually,
Ah, if I had but listened to my daughter. Alas, alas, if I had but listened to my daughter.
and would neither eat nor drink. So he commanded the servants to bring the prisoner before him. And then the king asked the peasant why he was always crying.
Ah, if I had but listened to my daughter.
And what it was that his daughter had said.
She told me that I ought not to take the mortar to you, for I should have to produce the pestle as well.
If you have a daughter who is as wise as that, let her come here.
She was therefore obliged to appear before the king, who asked her if she really was so wise, and said he would set her a riddle, and if she could guess that, he would marry her. She at once said yes, she would guess it. Then said the king,
Come to me not clothed, not naked, not riding, not walking, not in the road, and not out of the road. And if thou canst do that, I will marry thee.
So she went away, put off everything she had on, and then she was not clothed, and took a great fishing net, and seated herself in it, and wrapped it entirely round and round her so that she was not naked. And she hired an ass, and tied the fisherman's net to its tail, so that it was forced to drag her along, and that was neither riding nor walking. The ass had also to drag her in the ruts, so that she only touched the ground with her great toe, and that was neither being in the road nor out of the road. And when she arrived in that fashion, the king said she had guessed the riddle and fulfilled all the conditions. Then he ordered her father to be released from the prison, took her to wife, and gave into her care all the royal possessions. Now when some years had passed, the king was once drawing up his troops on parade, when it happened that some peasants who had been selling would stop with their wagons before the palace. Some of them had oxen yoked to them, and some horses. There was one peasant who had 3 horses, one of which was delivered of a young foal, and it ran away and lay down between 2 oxen which were in front of the wagon. When the peasants came together, they began to dispute, to beat each other and make a disturbance, and the peasant with the oxen wanted to keep the foal, and said one of the oxen had given birth to it, and the other said his horse had had it, and that it was his. The quarrel came before the king, and he gave the verdict that the foal should stay where it had been found, and so the peasant with the oxen, to whom it did not belong, got it. Then the other went away, and wept and lamented over his foal. Now he had heard how gracious his lady the queen was because she herself had sprung from poor peasant folks. So he went to her and begged her to see if she could not help him to get his foal back again. Said she,
Yes, I will tell you what to do, if thou wilt promise me not to betray me. Early tomorrow morning, when the king parades the guard, place thyself there in the middle of the road by which he must pass, take a great fishing net and pretend to be fishing, go on fishing too, and empty out the net as if thou hadst got it full.
and then she told him also what he was to say if he was questioned by the king. The next day, therefore, the peasant stood there and fished on dry ground. When the king passed by and saw that, he sent his messenger to ask what the stupid man was about. He answered,
I am fishing.
The messenger asked how he could fish when there was no water there. The peasant said,
It is as easy for me to fish on dry land as it is for an ox to have a foal.
The messenger went back and took the answer to the king, who ordered the peasant to be brought to him and told him that this was not his own idea, and he wanted to know whose it was. The peasant must confess this at once. The peasant, however, would not do so, and said always God forbid he should. The idea was his own. They laid him, however, on a heap of straw, and beat him and tormented him so long that at last he admitted that he had got the idea from the queen. When the king reached home again, he said to his wife,
Why hast thou behaved so falsely to me? I will not have thee any longer for a wife. Thy time is up. Go back to the place from whence thou camest to thy peasant's hut.
One favor, however, he granted her. She might take with her the one thing that was dearest and best in her eyes, and thus was she dismissed. She said,
Yes, my dear husband, if you command this, I will do it.
And she embraced him and kissed him, and said she would take leave of him. Then she ordered a powerful sleeping draught to be brought, to drink farewell to him. The king took a long draught, but she took only a little. He soon fell into a deep sleep, and when she perceived that, she called a servant and took a fair white linen cloth and wrapped the king in it. And the servant was forced to carry him into a carriage that stood before the door, and she drove with him to her own little house. She laid him in her own little bed, and he slept one day and one night without awakening, and when he awoke he looked round and said,
Good God! Where am I?
He called his attendants, but none of them were there. At length his wife came to his bedside and said,
My dear lord and king, you told me I might bring away with me from the palace that which was dearest and most precious in my eyes. I have nothing more precious and dear than yourself, so I have brought you with me.
Tears rose to the king's eyes, and he said,
Dear wife, thou shalt be mine, and I will be thine.
And he took her back with him to the royal palace and was married again to her. And at the present time they are very likely still living. The story illustrates loyalty and love within the family. Both the father and the daughter feel grateful and want to share what they have received with the king. Even when facing difficulties, they remain steadfast in their family love and are willing to sacrifice for each other. The daughter in the story is not only loyal but also wise. She comes up with a creative solution to solve the king's riddle and protect her father. Finding innovative solutions is emphasized as a positive trait in the story. The story also serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of not listening and trusting each other's opinions. The peasant father does not heed his daughter's advice, leading to mishaps and troubles. However, the daughter's trust and loyalty ultimately help them overcome challenges and reunite. This is the end of the storytelling session. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to listen to more great fairy tales. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.